Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for tuning in to another midweek tune-up. My name is DeAntoine Fitz. I'm the senior pastor here at Peace Chapel. Just to let you guys know a little bit about the purpose of this midweek tune-up, it's designed to take you a little bit deeper. We talk about one thing on Sunday. We're going through this message series entitled Homebound. It's a home prep series, but it's designed to take you a little bit deeper. Also, for those who are in life groups, you can use this as a life group lifter. And it's also an opportunity for you to get to know Peace Chapel, behind the scenes, the people that serve here at Peace Chapel. And I have with us today my brother from another mother, somebody that I love dearly, with us on this broadcast, my brother Juan Young, who's also one of the pastors here at Peace Chapel. Juan Young, thank you for joining this broadcast, brother. Can you tell us a little bit, can we start with just you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to Peace Chapel?
Sure. Thank you for bringing me in. I didn't know I was going to come, but it's okay. I came to Peace Chapel not by accident, but on purpose. You and I, we coached together. In fact, you coached my son, too, in basketball. So I realized that you had character, and you were on the same journey, it seemed that way, just like I was. A spiritual connection. I wanted to know a little bit about, well, a lot about more how and where and how does God relate to the world. So that's how I came. I met you at a football game, and I was asking you about a school for learning, because I wanted to get higher in my education in terms of biblical teaching. I went to LA Bible Training School, and you went there as well.
Right.
So from there, I just followed you. I said, well, this guy, pastor, he knows where he wants to go. He had a vision. So I just followed you to this church. And from there, it's been an upward battle, but a good journey, and we're in this together.
All right.
Yes.
Now, you're a father. You have two boys. Can you tell us a little bit about your young men that you're parenting? Give us a little background on that.
Well, you call them boys,
Right.
but I call them young men.
That's right.
And they would not let me do that when I call them boys. One is Juan Jr. He's 33 years of age. And then there's Jeremy Jr. He's not junior, but that's Jeremy. He's 30 years of age. All of them, both of them, are very, very mannerable men. I don't know how they became that way, but just by the grace of God and a little bit of my coaching and teaching and my wife at the time, we came and put God first. But we were learning at the same time. So that's how I came to raise my boys. I have 3 grandkids. From one junior, and from Juan, he has 1 son.
Okay. So
Yes.
Jeremy has 3 and Juan has 1.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So there was a period of time where, you were parenting by yourself because your wife passed away. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, we had my wife and I went to preschool. We had a preschool for over 18 years. And she, one day, went home in the afternoon, and she normally does, it's routine, and she went to sleep, and she never woke up. My son's Juan was in his first year of college, and Jeremy was in his 11th grade in high school. Traumatic change in our lives. And from there, I just took it on myself to let them know that, listen, things happen. And how can you tell somebody when they're in high school in the first year of college that their mom is gone? Mm. But looking back over it, we find out it's something that you have to go through. Right. And understanding that God is with you. We don't know a lot of things that happen, but we know that God is still able to do a lot of things. Mm. And so I was taking care of my boys by myself, and I knew that I had to get more of a handle on God. So I had this transition in myself. I did a little bit more educating myself, which leads me up to here. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, man, I was anxious to get you on because, I'm really impressed with you as a father, more so with the product and the way that your boys turned out. You have two strong, godly men, right, that you raised. Both of them are married and both of them have a relationship with the Lord. And so it's like you've passed down something really good to your boys, and it's impacting the next generation, which is really what this message series is all about. And so can you talk a little bit about, because I mean, obviously, the way I look at that as being more relational. Obviously you had to develop a relationship with them in the home. And we talked about that in one of the messages. Can you talk about your relationship in the home with your boys and how that impacted them becoming the responsible, godly men that they are today?
Yes. First of all, I had to make the decision to be in their lives. And that was because of my upbringing. It was 7 kids in our family. My dad was there until I was 12 years old. And then from there, I experienced a little bit lawlessness because the father he wasn't there. He was in our lives, but he wasn't in the home. And I knew, looking back on it, that, man, I needed guidance there. Because when my father left, I just went amok. I did things that I know that I'm ashamed of. I did things that kids do when they're unsupervised. So I said to myself, when I grew up, I'll never leave my kids. That's how I know. It's almost like I went back to save myself. Because everything that happens, it's a lesson. And if you don't learn from the lesson, you'll repeat it. So I told my kids they can depend on me at any cost. So I started coaching to have a relationship with them. We went and first of all, I was blessed to have kids, right? And then I started coaching them. And I said, I can do that. I can teach them. But I found out as I was teaching them, I was teaching other kids who didn't have a father. I became a mentor for these kids. And if you and I, if we had practice, it took about 2 hours after practice was over, because we were taking kids home in our car. My kids used to say, Dad, after practice, would you just take me home first? Because I know you're going to be spending time taking them.
Right.
But it was a job that I didn't mind doing, because I saw that they were eager, they were curious, and they were hungry just to have somebody that they could look up to. Kids be watching you, man. Yeah, whether you think it or not, they are watching you. So it's not more what you say, but what you do that matters.
That's powerful, man, because one of the things that I pointed out in the message is the importance of leveraging other people's influence, right? And you talked about yourself as a coach. Not only were you parenting your children, but in many cases you were parenting other people's children. And I always want to encourage people to leverage those relationships. If the father is not at home, leverage other relationships. Now, one of the things that we talked about in the message, we looked at a passage in Exodus chapter 20,
Yes.
where it talks about the sins of the father or the sins of the parents being passed down to the 3rd and 4th generation. And, we learned there that curses are passed down 3 to 4 generations because of disobedience, but then also there are blessings that are passed down 1,000 generations due to obedience, right? And so talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about things that were passed down from your father, from the previous generation to you, that sort of hindered you and made it difficult for you in your walk. And then talk a little bit about those things that were passed down to you, to your children, that were beneficial for them in their walk.
Yes, that's a good question. Every generation, we want them to succeed doing better than us. But I have to tell you, Pastor, my father was very influential in my upbringing, but my mom was the pillar.
Okay.
She was the cornerstone. And I think because of the age that when I was growing up, women can succeed where black men, it was hard for them. My father, he was He was a jack of all trades. He could do a lot of things. He was carpeting. He made us a mini bike. He was my first coach.
Okay.
Yeah, in that respect. So from there, at first I thought I blamed my father for not being in the house. That was an immaturity of me. But as I grew older, I understood how black men were suppressed way more than black women. And the system itself is not productive for black men.
Okay.
So I forgave my father and moved on, but at the same time, that was a negative thing. I wish he would have been in my life a lot more. But because he wasn't, the generational, I call it not the curse, but the talent, I do a lot of things too. I have a lot of talents that I do. I took that from my father.
Okay.
And so that was a good thing that came out of that. And I brought that on to my sons. Like you were saying, it's good to have kids in a village. That's why I let you coach my son. And that's why I made myself available for young kids who didn't have a parent or a male figure in there. Because that's what we're about, especially when we are supposed to give. And that's what, while we're here at Peace Chapel, we give, we show, not just talk, but we actually do it in practical applications and physical activities.
Yeah.
Yes.
So before we transition to what you passed down to your children that you think was beneficial for them, you mentioned something that I want to tap into a little bit. You talked about the struggle of the black male. I was a part of a discussion a couple of days ago with a white pastor, and he wanted to know, how can the white church play a part in helping African Americans get past some of the struggle? And one of the questions that he asked, one of the things that he said was, help me or help my church to understand the struggle of the black man.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about that? Because a lot of white churches, white people, people of different nationalities want to help blacks, but they just don't know how. They don't understand our struggle. And obviously our struggle is different from the struggle of other nationalities.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about our struggle as black men?
Yes, I can. In fact, there's a white friend of mine named Zach, and he's in the same position as probably the guy that you knew, right? And for me, he asked me, he was telling me, he said, Pastor, I just want to let you know, when George Floyd passed, when he got killed, I'm with you. I just want to let you know I'm with you. I hear you. If there's anything I can do. And he gave me his phone number too. I didn't respond back to him. And I did that today. Because I can't, for me, I tell him, I can't teach you. I mean, I'd spend the rest of my life teaching you about the black struggle. And I don't know how to teach you about the black struggle. You have to learn on your own. Get you some books. Go on YouTube. There's plenty enough. But I can just tell you there is a systematic system set in place, long time, that just has, for black people, not good. It's not beneficial for them. And I'm not sure if you could say, but getting back to it, it's hard to tell somebody how racism is ingrained. They just can't understand, Pastor. I mean, so I don't want to get into a tit for tat, going back and forth. The only thing I tell them, it's sin. And anytime we take God out of the equation, lawlessness happens. So what I tried to do in terms of raising my sons, I wanted to prepare them for the world. But more than that, I wanted them to know that there's a God who brought them here. I'm their father, but there's a father even greater than me. And prepare them for being African Americans in the United States. And it's a little bit different. We must prepare them. And that's what I was doing with education, discipline, covering, and warnings. Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, one of the things that I share with him, statistically, when we're talking about the curses that was passed down from one generation to the next and the trauma, we talked a little bit about generational trauma. 40% of households are households with a single parent.
Yeah.
So typically it's the mother, right? But then when you get into the African American community, 7 out of 10 households, children are being born to a single parent. And so we have a share of trauma. We deal with trauma at a higher level than other races. And, to not have the father in the home is trauma, because when you look at other statistics like crime, like over 90% of the people in jail, they don't have a father in the home. And so not having a father in the home is a big deal, right? I didn't grow up in the home where my father and my mother were there together, but I did have a relationship with my father, and that played a huge role in my life. And so if you can talk a little bit about what you passed on to your boys that you think was very instrumental towards them becoming the men that they are today, men who love the Lord, who love their wives, men who are godly and taking care of their children. Can you talk a little bit about what you passed on to them?
I can. And you're right. One of the things that I noticed too, and the reason why I'm passing these attributes on to my kids, we had a preschool. And when I first started the preschool, I can see that there were the wife and the husband. But as time progressed, and we moved up, and I moved up, and we had about 75 kids at the last, it moved from the husband picking up the kids, the wife might drop them off, but there was a tag team. To the last 3 years of the preschool, young kids were driving up, and you can hear boom, 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 boom. It was a different kind of culture I was getting. I was like, wow. Shades, the kids, the parents even wouldn't even get out the car. They would open the door, let the kids out. And so it was a different kind of upbringing. I started to see grandmothers coming and picking up. So it was that village. Young people were having kids. Young people were having kids. Grandmothers were like grandmothers at 35 and 40 years of age.
Right.
So it was a culture. I said I wanted to raise my kids to be responsible, not to blame anybody, to be biblical. Everything you can do, even at that young age. I just not only talked about it, I acted it out. So I wasn't even thinking about doing this, right? I wasn't thinking about when I was younger. I just knew that what I was raised up on, I didn't want them to do that. I didn't want them to have that. So the struggle that I went through, I did not want them to have that struggle. And I wanted them to know, no matter what, that their dad was in them. Their dad was there. And we went through the struggle together. I remember my son, Jeremy. He got sick one time, and man, he was like 11. He got so weak. He got so weak that we had to wheel him into the intensive care. But when I look back on it, he said, "Dad, I remember you being there." We don't know the impact we have on our kids, and it wasn't conscious. But I just said, I wanted to make sure that my kids, both my boys, knew, one, they were African American in America, but they had a support group no matter what, right or wrong, that they were going to be there. So that's why I wanted to make sure that they knew that when they was raised, be responsible, have a biblical understanding, and make sure that you pass that on to your next generation. Both my sons have boys. Jeremy has 2 daughters, but both of them. And I'm looking back when I go over their house, I'm looking back and I'm looking at them. Now they're parents. It's almost like I'm reliving my experience through them. They don't know that, but I'm looking at them and I'm looking at, wow, that's how I did with my kids. They're very, very godly men, and they're very, very in tune to their kids. Yes.
Yeah. One of the things that I admire the most about you and with your boys is that you guys have a relationship. And it seems that you leveraged the influence or the relationship over the authority. I think that a lot of times we as fathers, I know one of the mistakes that I made was I leveraged position and authority too long as opposed to the relationship piece. I think that's a very important component to helping our children in the transition. We need to emphasize the relationship. Now, when I look at what's going on right now in our society with all of the gun violence, the gang banging, the drug addiction, many of the challenges that we face in the African American community, what I see is it is a problem, but there's a problem behind the problem, right? And a lot of times we don't want to address the problem behind the problem. We want to deal with the problem. And the problem behind the problem you mentioned was sin. A lot of people don't like to hear that these days. Right. We've kind of gotten outdated with using the term sin. Yeah. But the problem behind the problem is the heart. That's another way that I'll say it. And it's because we've strayed away from God's ideal.
Yes.
That God's ideal is that two shall become one flesh. And whenever we stray away from God's ideal, it's not that God is looking to punish us, but the consequences themselves. Right. The consequence to straying away from God's ideal is what we're experiencing today, right?
Yes.
And so I want to just, if we can, talk a little bit about one Bible passage that I wanted to look at. I wanted to look at a couple, but here's one that I wanted to look at, and I wanted to see how you would apply this to what we're dealing with in our society today as it relates to really trying to repair things in the inner city, trying to prepare things in our society. It's a passage in the book of Psalm. It's Psalm 127, and I want to read verses 1 through 2. It says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain." Right?
Yes.
"Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves." So how would you apply that scripture to the home and utilizing the home to really deal with the real problem, not the surface problem, but the real problem?
Yeah, that's a good Bible passage. And what does it mean? It means that when we do whatever we do and we don't have God in front of it, it's for naught. So for me, when I see people doing things or building or just want to progress even in their lives, if it's not biblically based, if it's not based on God's word, everything should be coming from God's word. I'm not saying you guys should beat each other over the head with the Bible verses, but morality has a place, and it shouldn't supersede what the Bible says. A lot of people are going around like right now and protesting, and they're doing it in a peaceful manner. Some are rioting and things of that nature too. But because it says that if you do these things, but if you don't have a foundation, the cornerstone is the church, the cornerstone is Jesus Christ, and these things are pivotal, because if you don't do it, you're doing it in your own works. You're doing it in your own strength, and that's going to be okay for a while, but your strength is going to wear out. But if you understand what he's saying, everything we do and all that we say, we give you the honor, and we have you go in terms and go in front of it, then there's no way that we will not proceed. Now, it's going to call us out. But if you know, like in James, count it all joy if you go through all these trials and tribulations because the testing of your faith will do some things for you, right?
Right.
So everything has to be grounded in the Word, and we're not doing that. And it goes back to what you say. So a father is the one that normally sets the standards. And if you say, just like we were talking about earlier, if there's no father, there's no rules, there's no direction, there's no wisdom. And I've levered that to have, even with my sons now. I used to rule with authority. But I know that at a certain point, I can see and tell that my kids were starting to catch on. So as old as I am, I call my sons and ask, hey, what do you think of this? They used to call me and say, Dad, what do you think of this? I want to do this. Now I'm asking them, hey, I want to get your thoughts on this.
Right.
So now they know that my dad don't know everything, but he's willing to learn, because we're going to learn from the womb to the tomb. And when you think you can't learn from your kids, you can't think you got everything all together, like the millennials can't tell you anything. That's a wrong way to go. So I've levered them, and I've given them their kudos, so to speak. They're supposed to outdo me. That's how I look at it.
I like that, man. And I want to kind of transition there, but what I get from what you said is that, if God is not involved in it, if we're not doing it God's way, then it's all in vain, right?
Yeah.
So I want to look at one more Bible passage along the lines of what you just mentioned, where you talked about authority and leveraging authority, position, and power, where parents ride with that a little too long. And if we stay on that lane or on that pathway for too long, it'll provoke our children to wrath, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to look at one Bible passage in Ephesians chapter 4, and I want to use this one as a closing Bible passage. It says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord." And so it's talking about there's a time when we can leverage position and authority too much, to the point where we push our children away from God as opposed to closer to God. And so I want you to talk to that father or that mother out there that want to get it right, and they want to learn how to discipline their child, but they're up against so many challenges because they just don't know.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to them?
Well, here's the advice I would give to them. I want you to understand, it's not what you say, it's what you do. It's not how you say it, but the intent behind it. A lot of times we do a lot of things out of emotion, Pastor, and it shouldn't be. Kids are not stupid. They're not looking at what you're saying, they're looking at what you're doing. Not only on Sundays, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You want to make sure that when you say anything, you have it backed up by the Word and backed up by your life. Because that's one thing that's very important. So I'll close with this. When I was growing up, I had to do what I had to do what they told me, because that was the word, that was the way it went at that time. And when I got like this, when I became an adult, I said, okay, I don't want to do it that way. I want to live. I want to show them. Because like I said, they're going to be becoming an adult. And a lot of times they're adults right now. So put God in everything you do. And no matter what it looks like, because sometimes there's going to be dark days, but you have to remember this. God is in this, and he's going to carry you through, and he's going to win. We're already going to win. That's the perfect thing you can do. We win. We win. We win.
Amen, man.
Amen.
Thank you so much for joining me, Pastor Juan. You know I have the utmost. I call you Pastor Juan, but you're my brother, man. I mean, we talk about things that are personal. You're someone that I can be open and transparent with. That's a challenge for me. as a pastor because there are not a lot of people that I can be that way. They expect for me to be superhuman.
Right.
But you're one of the people that I can be myself with. And so I want to thank you for joining us on this broadcast. And I want to thank you for being a part of our Peace Chapel family. But more importantly, I want to thank you for being a contributor to the good of our society because you pass down blessings to your children. I want to talk to, for the rest of our time together, to our men. You guys mean so much to our society. When you look in the Bible, the blessing is passed down from the father to his son, from the father to his oldest son. Anytime the enemy wanted to do away with a generation or to do away with the future of a race or a group of people, he tried to eliminate the males. Pharaoh tried to eliminate all of the males, and then you fast forward to the New Testament, Herod tried to eliminate all of the males. You are royalty, and a lot of you guys are trying to lead with authority, but you're not under authority. You haven't lined yourself under the authority of God. And so until you line yourself under the authority of God, you are not equipped or qualified to properly lead your children. This nation is dependent upon you. The curse that's on the land is because the fathers have strayed away from God's ideal, and we have all of the women that are raising these children by themselves. Kudos to the mothers that are trying to do it on your own, but we need our males to step up to the plate. When you look at Malachi, as it closes out on a dark note. It talks about God cursing the land. And the reason why God cursed the land is because the people didn't take heed from the prophet Elijah, who was trying to turn the hearts of the parents or the fathers back towards the children. When the hearts of the fathers are turned back towards the children, the hearts of the children are turned back towards the father. And that's how the curse is broke. And so the men, I want to talk to you. You guys have to step up to the plate. You are the ones that can make a difference in our society. Never, ever play the role of a victim, because you're not a victim. You're victorious. But you have to line up with your Heavenly Father. And if you do that, you can play a part in turning things around in our society and making things better for the people in the land. So I thank you guys for tuning in. I want you guys to be a part of our family, our community. And so I want you guys, if you haven't done so, I want you guys to text Peace Chapel, all one word, to 31996. Again, that's Peace Chapel, all one word, to 31996. And I want you guys to invite somebody to our next talk. Our next broadcast is going to be Sunday at 10:15 a.m. We're going to talk a little bit more about this Homebound series and how you can use your home as a training ground to prepare your children to be successful in society. And so I thank you guys for tuning in. God bless you, and God keep you in his ever-loving care.